In the House is Speaker Philip Gunn. Good morning, sir. How are you? It's been a busy week, and we draw down quickly with Sine Die in the horizon.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Paul. It's good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Good to be with you, sir.
Got a lot to do in the next week or so, and
So
you're right.
We heard the news that you've made some concessions as far as the House is concerned. Kind of explain exactly what we're talking about here for
Thank you.
us.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity. I would like to just kind of take a step back and frame this entire discussion for the listeners so that they can kind of understand what the situation is. You know, when we talk about taxes, that is, to simplify it, it's simply the taking of citizens' money by the government. The government just forces the taking of citizens' money. And we do that, all governments do that, for the purpose of providing certain services. The state of Mississippi has had a budget of around $6 billion for the last few years. So the state of Mississippi has decided that $6 billion is what we need to perform the functions of government. Now, over the last couple of years, we have collected about $2.5 billion more than that. The revenue estimate, which came out last week, shows that we are on pace to collect around $7 billion. In the past year, we've collected about $1.5 billion more than we estimated. So by June of this year, if we continue on the pace of collections, we're going to have about $2.5 billion more than what we have said we need to perform government. Mm-hmm. That means we've collected $2.5 billion more dollars from the taxpayers than we are using. This is the excess. This is the extra. And it's been our contention that we ought to give some of that back to the taxpayers. I think that's simple. I think that's common sense. I think anybody who is conservative, be they Republican or Democrat, if they're conservative, they should agree that some of that money, at the very least, the very minimum, should be given back to the taxpayers. I am baffled that anyone who is a Republican would oppose such a concept. And so this has been the whole genesis behind our efforts to eliminate the income tax. We are collecting way more money than we need. Now, we don't oppose the proposals that we put out there propose to return a portion of that 2.5. It still leaves some of the 2.5 to do other things, and that's been one of the complaints or the arguments that we've heard from the Democrats is, oh, there's more we need to do. We need to pave more roads. We need to expand this. We need to expand that. We need to spend more money. Well, what we have proposed does allow for some of that extra money to be used for those kinds of things, but we think it's high time to give some of that excess back to the citizens. So that kind of frames the discussion over the income tax. We have presented over the last year 4 different proposals on how we can do that. We have tried to develop or address every concern that's been mentioned, and I believe we have eliminated every one of those concerns. Every time we have offered a proposal, the Senate has come up with some excuse as to why that won't work. Each time we have knocked that down. Every excuse we have eliminated, and we've now come forward with yet a 4th proposal that will achieve the same goal. Our goal has been to eliminate the income tax without further legislative action and get there as quickly as we can. Mm-hmm. Now, what we brought out yesterday was yet another 4th idea on how to do that, and it simply proposes to eliminate $100 million a year as we move along. I know people think that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, and it's a lot of and that's a lot of money that could help our taxpayers. But in perspective, $100 million is 1.5% of our budget. That is 1.5 pennies on the dollar. I certainly think if we're conservatives, if we call ourselves conservatives, we can give 1.5 pennies on the dollar back to the taxpayers.
What does that come out to as far as the compared to your first plan, where I think the immediate savings per year was over $4,000? No, it was over $1,800. What was the first
Yes, sir.
plan?
Yeah,
that you put out?
the first plan that we rolled out initially would put
Was it
$1,300 per
right.
taxpayer, $2,600 per married
And a
couple.
household income of what?
But $40,000. That's on $40,000.
On
So,
$40,000 now with this proposal, what would the savings be?
it's not
per
nearly
year?
as much. It's not nearly as much.
It's
but
a lot less.
But it is a start, and it is again an attempt on our part to try to get the Senate to do something. Now, we see nothing wrong with the first proposal you talked about. We see nothing wrong with giving $1,300 back.
But you're talking about now, you're dropping down from the savings with your initial plan was about $1,300. This would be about $100.
Initially, yes. Now, eventually, as it peels off, you grow that each year as it grows.
Are we serious about 18 years to do this?
Certainly, Paul, as I said, one of our goals is to get there sooner than later.
Yeah.
And we brought out a proposal initially that did it in 10 years, and then we brought out a proposal that did it in 12 years, then one at 14 years, but we can't get the Senate to cooperate. So we're just trying to find a way to get something out there that will begin to give our taxpayers some relief. I believe we can do this. I think the numbers support this. Well, go back to the revenue estimate, Paul. Go back to October. We did a revenue estimate, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, that I think used 6.4 as the number. We know that number's not right. The trends over the last year have shown that we were on pace to collect $7 billion. Now, the Senate produced a report wherein they claimed the 6.4 number, where it was going to be a revenue loss. We said that's not right. The number has already been proven to be wrong. The collections have far exceeded that, and we are on pace to do $7 billion for the year. They used that as an excuse as to why they couldn't do income tax. We contended that $7 billion was the number. Lo and behold, last week, the Revenue Estimating Group met and produced the revised estimate, which is $7 billion.
And this is without one-time money.
No, sir. This is all recurring revenue. That's
what I'm saying. It is recurring money. It's not one-time dollars.
Exactly. We do not use any one-time money in this.
All right, let me ask you this, because the three things as a citizen out there, I think most of us want, and it's only three things. It's number one, give the access, do something for the taxpayers. We understand about growing government and all of that, but this number one is give money, the access back to the taxpayers. If it's $100 million a year, that's $100 million back into the economy that's going to turn over. Number two is make sure it's fiscally sound. We don't want to put the state in jeopardy in the future, and I think you guys have done that. Number three, does it make us more competitive in the South? If those three things are there, then I guess what I'm saying, are those three elements there in the new proposal that you have?
Absolutely. They're just not as great as what the previous proposals were. But again, we couldn't get any takers on the previous proposal, so we're just trying to search for. I will say this, Paul, under the plan that we unveiled yesterday, it will be the largest income tax cut in the history of our state. So it's still got some attractiveness. It will be the largest tax cut in the history of the state. So there's a lot of progress there, moving in the right direction. It's just not as significant as we think we can afford. We would like to see something more aggressive, but we can't seem to get any cooperation on the other end.
To which a lot of people are going to ask this, Mr. Speaker, at what point does it become to the nothing is better? I mean, to the point of where you have to go down again, and you really achieve the Senate's goal by the time you keep compromising on something like this.
Well, we have tried to keep in focus that we are trying to help the taxpayer. We're trying to give the taxpayers as much relief as possible. That's what we've been trying to do. Still with this proposal yesterday, as I said, it is the largest tax cut in the history of the state. So it's still. I want to ask you this. Still good.
When we come back, we've got a bumper, and I need to get out and come back on the other side. But how does this jive with what apparently the lieutenant governor said in the past 24, 48 hours, that he's not for any tax, and we'll talk about that, any tax reduction, when we come back, if that's an accurate statement, and more with the Speaker, Philip Gunn, coming up next. I do want to ask you to comment on this one from Senator Norwood, who is a Democrat, and he's requesting that Ethics Committee look into the meeting situation, that with the opening meeting laws, or act, and that's been a story out there. So while I have you on here as the speaker, would you comment to that? He's officially asked the Ethics Commission to decide whether the House Republican caucus meetings under the dome, open only to the Republicans in the House of Representatives, violate the state's Open Meetings Act. As an esteemed lawyer, what do you think?
No, sir. The law is clear. It's not a public body. We're not subject to the Open Meetings Act. But incidentally, we learned yesterday that the very day that he submitted that letter, the Ethics Commission returned that letter to him, telling him they did not issue opinions regarding the conduct of others. So his request was, according to what we have learned, his request was summarily rejected by the Ethics Commission. He did not bother to tell the rest of the world that, but they chose to leak that letter anyway to create some sort of impression that there was still something improper about that, and it's just simply not true. There is nothing improper about that. The House caucus does not qualify as a public body, nor does a Democratic caucus, who meets just in the same way. And not only in Mississippi, but in every legislature around the country, caucuses meet in that way. One of my staffers used to work in Washington and told me that the Washington caucuses meet in similar fashion. So the Democratic caucus meets in the state capitol the same way the Republican caucus meets.
I got you. And the venue being in the state capitol doesn't change that as far as where the venue is.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. So that's just an attempt to try to create an impression that just is not true.
All right, let's get back to the personal income tax. So what's the status of this one, Mr. Speaker? Is it now in the hands of the Senate, or still in the conference committee, or where is it as far as the status of that new bill done?
Well, each side has passed a version, a proposal of income tax. The one that we have passed is not the one you and I have been talking about. This is just an offer of compromise. But the actual bill that we passed a week or two ago serves to fully eliminate the income tax with no sales tax, and is we believe, a much better plan than what we're trying to negotiate out. The Senate passed a version which is just nothing. We have contended and said it publicly. It is a token attempt to try to make people think they got tax relief when they really didn't. So the House has been much more aggressive in trying to present proposals that eliminate the income tax. I don't know of any. Well, let me say this. We have had many senators who have told us informally in the hallways that they are ready to vote for elimination. I believe that the overwhelming majority of senators who are Republican, who call themselves Republican, favor giving some of this excess back to the taxpayers. And if that is if the lieutenant governor claims that he doesn't have the votes, and just put it out there and see. Because
the lieutenant governor, go ahead.
And I just think if a bill hits the floor, that's going to pass. And so let's give it a chance. If we really want to help return some of this money to the taxpayers, we need to put it out there.
Has the lieutenant governor stated that he is for no tax elimination at all?
You know, Paul, I have. Yes, he said that to me, but he's also said it apparently in an interview yesterday, maybe. I did not see the interview. Many people have told me about the interview that he did with one of our media outlets, wherein he said that. I personally have not seen the interview. I don't know that that's exactly what he said, but it has been represented to me that that's what he said.
A lot of response on the C-SPAR text line. Paul, please tell Speaker Gunn that it's time to stop altering the House plan. It's time for the Senate to compromise or take responsibility for no tax plan being passed. We can change senators in the next election. Just a simple taxpayer from Reservoir, but I have not talked to anybody that thinks the House plan is a bad idea. I don't see where the Senate gets the idea that people don't want it. So it goes on down there, but the general consensus from our audience is that probably not in favor of the negotiations down so low that it's so menial at $100. That's half a fill-up in some of these vehicles. So, but
well, I would agree. I would agree with that. And we have worked very hard. As I said, we presented 4 different ideas which fully eliminate it. We are still trying to provide some tax relief to the citizens. And I will say, Paul, that the comments we get around the state are consistent with what you just said. Everybody who has weighed in on the issue is for full elimination. At least those who are conservative are in favor of full elimination. And the outside interest, I think you and I talked about this the last time I was on the show. If you don't believe what the House and Senate are saying, just look at the outside groups that have weighed in on this, and every one of them has said we are for elimination and we are in favor of the House plan. Groups like Empower Mississippi, Center for Public Policy, Americans for Tax Reform, the NFIB, Small Business Association, Bigger Pie Forum, National Taxpayers Union, American Conservative Union. The list goes on and on and on of people who have weighed in and said we need to get rid of the income tax. It makes us more competitive in attracting businesses and
but
young
at some
people.
point, at some point out there, though, isn't it when you've negotiated it down too much? Isn't it better just to maybe hope that the governor will call a special session and do something there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think we are done trying to find a way to make this happen. At some point, it's got to be meaningful. It's got to be meaningful tax relief. We have said that. I have used the word transformative in the past. I want tax relief that makes a difference in the lives of people. And you can go back to our first proposal, which we passed early in the session, which got 107 votes. Yeah. That's Republicans and Democrats. Under that, we've said under.
I don't know how you can. I'm not sure how you can negotiate down much more. We went from $1,300 to a $40,000 household income or income $40,000.
Correct.
$1,300. Now to the first year only $100 per year. You've dropped the car tag altogether. They've negotiated that out of it. So somebody's got $1,000 car tag. They're not going to get it $500 cheaper. They're going to have to pay $1,000. So I'm not sure how far you can negotiate down to where there's any meaning to it at all, especially if you have to have the maturation of this thing of 18 years.
Right. It's an excellent point, Paul.
It's a little disappointing.
Well, the only redeeming thing about the latest offer is that it is the largest tax cut in the history of the state. If we're able to achieve that, we will have achieved the largest tax cut in the history of the state, and we can continue to fight for the rest of it, another day. But we've had over a year for the Senate to get on board. We rolled this thing out in February last year. Initially, we've had a year to sit down and talk, and the deadline is Saturday. It's kind of too late to be having these discussions. So, Paul, we have called on the governor to call a special session. You and I have done that on this show before. We have called on the governor to do a special session, and we think the time is now. The issue is hot. The topic is hot. It is the focus of discussion. Any time that we wait would let the irons die down, and so we believe now is the time we would call on the governor to engage. We have tried to get the senators on board. We have tried to do everything we can to get them to come to the table. But we need the governor to call them to the table. He needs to engage. He needs to call them into his office. He needs to say it's time to get in the game.
We've had on the air Senator David Blunt. Recently we had Hob Bryan, all staunch Democrats to that party, and I understand that, and several other people. But for the most part, they say if we've got $2 billion or $1 billion, we just need to go on and grow government or spend it on something else. And it's a little bit aggravating because nobody ever comes back and says, well, what about let's give it back to the taxpayers who are making this happen? Because there's always, I guarantee you, if we increase government by $2 billion from $6 to $8 billion, and there was another surplus, they're going to say, let's give that, put that back in government. So you're never going to fill that gap there.
Never. And that's an excellent point, Paul. As I said, we're trying to give the citizens back 1.5 pennies on the dollar. If we don't give that back to them, what's going to happen to that? They're going to spend it.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that because as we've learned, everybody's got lobbyists out there except the taxpayers. Everybody's got a lobbyist except the taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, always appreciate it, sir. Don't give up the fight.